where, according to a civil society organization, Liberia's President Weah has fulfilled only 8% of his campaign promises ahead of the October elections. Fighting corruption was a main focus of Weah's inaugural address in 2018. However, he and top officials have come under criticism for allegedly amassing wealth and building private properties, and there have been reports of shady deals involving key government actors. An advocacy group, Justice Forum Liberia, stated they were hugely disappointed in the Weah administration as they have yet to see foreign direct investment and only see corruption and hardships. The chairperson of Weah's party, the Congress for Democratic Change, dismissed the criticisms and highlighted the government's development and niche achievements such as the construction of roads and hospitals, and stated that Weah's re-election was certain. And now joining us for this conversation, we have Joel Brooks, CEO, Global News Network Liberia, and Henry Costa, political commentator, Delaware, United States of America. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So I'll begin with you, Henry, because we're hearing quite sad reports. Now, according to a report by Nemote Partners for Democratic Development, President Weah has delivered on only 8% of his campaign promises. Now, that's a bit too little out of 100%, just 8%. What exactly is your assessment of the Weah administration? Do you believe that the Weah administration has just performed really poorly in terms of corruption in Liberia?
Yes, ma'am. I think Mr. Weah doesn't even seem to understand that he has a problem. And as far as corruption is concerned, his administration is very, very, very reckless. His patent and flagrant display of ill-gotten wealth, the mansions that they are building, the businesses they are establishing, it's just blatant, and they don't seem to care at all. But somehow they are convinced that they are going to be able to win re-election in 9 months, but that doesn't seem likely.
And what exactly do you think that he has been doing such? I mean, what exactly is the proof? Is it coming from the government officials or just from Weah alone? What exactly makes you say that he has actually performed poorly in the area of corruption? Because for them, they still say that they have done well in the government.
Well, he couldn't possibly say that, because let me give you some specifics. 4 months into Mr. Weah's term, he demolished one of his old properties, which was no longer livable. And in its place, he began the construction of a massive mansion. He also, at the same time, started building a whole estate of 48 condominiums. He started acquiring other properties, and it was not just him. You know, we have a follow the leader culture. His ministers were doing the same. These are people who we knew, some of them personally, who didn't have money, and overnight they began acquiring massive homes and leading lifestyles that their salaries could not support. So it was just very obvious. Then we had a situation with some 16 billion Liberian dollars. I'm sure you must have heard about that, which is the equivalent of about 100 million United States dollars, most of which, according to investigations, went missing. Then we had a mop-up exercise where supposedly there was excess liquidity of Liberian currency in circulation. So the idea was to infuse 25 million US dollars from our reserve in New York in order to mop up that excess Liberian dollar liquidity. That process was characterized by unorthodox practices. It was investigated by the government itself. It was found to be extremely corrupt. Well over $15 million of the $25 million could not be accounted for. Mr. Weah promised that he would set up, people would be prosecuted. Nobody was prosecuted. It's been years. So we can name specific instances where patent and blatant corruption has happened, with Mr. Weah himself leading the way. We've had cases where the Minister of Finance went into the accounts, the donor accounts of donors, and took out millions of dollars, and which infuriated the donors, something which I published to the public, and the Minister of Finance came back and said they were borrowing the money. They went into the bank accounts of donors and took out their donor funds and said it was a borrowing initiative. And they, as far as we are concerned, that money has not been restituted. So corruption is, we've always had corruption. It's not new to us. But the extent to which Mr. Weah and his coterie of thieves have taken this corruption is just unparalleled or uncommon to what we are used to.
Okay, you've clearly highlighted that corruption still stands in Liberia, and for you and from all what you've said, George Weah has done little to nothing to curb corruption. Now, basically talk about achievements of construction of hospitals and roads. Aside corruption, what else has Liberia done, or what else has George Weah done to develop Liberia, or has he simply done nothing in Liberia?
No, ma'am, it would be unfair to say he's done nothing. I mean, he's made it very clear that his focus will be building roads. So he's borrowed lots of money, which has ballooned our national debt stock. And he's constructing a few roads, which are very badly built. The roads don't last, which is a waste of money. He's doing these community roads, and he's doing a few major roads, but the roads are built very poorly, and they do not last. So it's not only are you increasing our national debt stock, you're building roads that do not last. That's one thing he's done. And recently, we had a hospital that was funded by the government of the UAE, built by them 100%. So some of these things have happened on his watch, but the inflation has worsened. Unemployment is worsening. Lots of multinational companies in the country have folded up and left, causing unemployment to increase and the accompanying hardship. And things have just generally worsened. The mood in the country is one of disillusionment. I was recently there. I just came back 2 weeks ago, my first trip in 2 years, after the incident where Mr. Weah and his government tried to have him extradited from Sierra Leone, which they failed to do. And so I went back home, and my heart just sank by what I saw, the poverty written on the people's faces. The country has become a dysfunctional cesspool. Nothing works. Mr. Weah is not in charge. You recall a few months ago, Mr. Weah went to the World Cup. He drew $1.5 million from our national coffers and went away for 48 days, spending a few weeks in Qatar to see his son play for the U.S. national football team. Mr. Weah just doesn't care. He's having a great time, and we're going to give him a red card in October of this year.
He's a former football star. There's still a lot of love for him also, I believe. Is that still the same thing going on in Liberia, or this has contradicted any form of likeness or popularity that President George Weah had when he was first inaugurated as president?
President Weah was extremely popular, used to be at least, and legislative elections in Montserrat, for example, the very hotbed of our political landscape. We took that seat from him in 2019, a year in office, a seat he controlled for many years, his party. Weah rose to power on the back entirely of his football popularity. But that honeymoon period is over, at least for most Liberians. Today, he is struggling. He has lost every major by-election since coming to power. And he himself is going to lose in October. The writing is on the wall. So he just doesn't seem to get it. I think he finds himself in this cocoon that he's still the guy who could dribble and bedazzle the audience with his talismanic football skills. But unfortunately, he's not. Even in football, we're not doing well. We had a situation where FIFA banned Liberia. We were not fit to host FIFA games because the quality of our football pitch had fallen so low, far below FIFA acceptable minimum standards. So Mr. Weah has failed colossally on every single front. Even the game that made him, he has failed on that front to try to develop it.
Now, still looking at this, I wonder where the problem is coming from. Is it coming from his cabinet members, or is it just his laxity at dealing with things affecting Liberia? Where exactly is this problem coming from?
That's a good question. So I happen to know Mr. Weah personally myself. And knowing the man, I can say this to you. Mr. Weah has very little interest in governing because he has very little knowledge in governing. So what does he do? What he has interest in is partying. Mr. Weah knows how to have a good time. He spends most of his time partying. He goes to Ghana on a regular. He throws these parties. He's having a good time. Everywhere he goes, he's flying a private jet, running for around $15,000 per hour. And that's what he does. So he has his lackeys in the government who basically run the government based on, they basically do what they want to do. There is no coherent leadership because the president is an absentee president who is distracted by the pleasure things, the things that he loves to do. And so that is the problem. There's no leadership in place. Mr. Weah is not visible. He's not in charge. So his people are doing exactly what they want to do. They just supply him all his needs, as much money as he wants, whatever he wants, and they do whatever they want to do.
Now, this is the idea of going out and having fun, despite being a relapse on his leadership skills. I mean, some people would say when you go out, you get to meet people. There was also some comments that when he went to Qatar, it could also bring a kind of investment to Liberia. Now, still looking at foreign direct investment, that's where I'm heading to. Now, it's often seen as a key driver of economic growth. President George Weah is known internationally, globally. I mean, can you discuss any efforts made by the Weah administration to attract a foreign investment with his lifestyle, with his profile? And let's just stop there. Has he made any effort to use this to attract foreign investment in Liberia?
That's a brilliant question. There were those who believed that because of Mr. Weah's global image and his iconic status as a football great, he would have been able to use that to charm and woo investors into the country. I mean, I actually believe that to some extent, even though I never supported him. I felt that this guy knows a lot of people who are rich and powerful. They might look to come to Liberia to do something. But for some reason, nobody takes Mr. Weah seriously. I think the attitude was, let's wait and see how he begins to govern. Mr. Weah made a bad impression from the very onset. From the very onset, there was one scandal, financial scandal, corruption scandal after the other. I think that put a bad taste in people's mouths. Every single attempt by this government to try to land a deal of some sort has never worked. Let me give an example. They went to some phony company in Singapore with very little or no due diligence done at all, and they said this company could borrow the government of Liberia some $500 million at a 3 or 2% interest rate. It sounded too good to be true. That deal never fell through. He also promised us that his friend, some business guy in Burkina Faso, would bring some $400 million from a company called Ibomaf. That also did not fall through. His wife promised she was bringing a company from China to make hair, to train our people how to make hair. They were taking a group of women to China, train them, bring the factory. That didn't work. Every single deal this guy has promised, everything he has promised never worked. So I'm like, it is perhaps because of the bad impression he made on the onset. The corruption, the scandals, one after the other. Nobody has come, ma'am. Nobody has come.
That's quite shocking, I must say. But let's still come back to this fact. Like you've said lots of things about President George Weah, which is quite disappointing. I mean, looking at the hopes and aspirations that people had for George Weah's administration. But now 2023 is within us now, and we're expecting elections in Liberia. Looking at the political terrain, aside George Weah, who are the people of Liberia, who are Liberians looking at, possibly looking at, as an opposition for George Weah?
Well, the option, the choice for the people in the Liberian people in the overwhelming majority is pretty clear. They're looking to elect the former vice president, who was vice president in the last administration, former vice president Joseph Yuman Boakai. He is the front runner, I would say. There have been tons of opinion polls conducted across the country, and the former Vice President Joe Boakai is in a comfortable position to win in 2023 October. This is something that really worries the Weah government, and they have engaged in all manners of propaganda trying to, but what makes the former Vice President even puts him in a great position, which he finds himself in, is the fact that the people compare him. This is a great experienced statesman who has an impeccable track record of integrity, and who is a humble, decent man. And when they compare him with George Weah, a footballing president who is essentially a playboy, who globetrots and blows our money and has not managed to bring any investors to the country to create jobs. So they see these two individuals are a sharp contrast. And I think now the people yearn for the former vice president, who came second, by the way, to Mr. Weah in the last presidential election. So yes, Joseph Yimon Boakai, from all indications, is poised to become the next president of Liberia in October.
Well, we'll definitely wait for the people to decide. We're putting our eyes on Liberia and, of course, other countries in Africa who are also going to hold their presidential elections in 2023. Thank you so much, Henry Costa, political commentator from Delaware, USA, for joining us on this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure. And I wish you guys a peaceful and safe election in Nigeria. We are watching closely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.